This is the Ideas Podcast, the show where learning and development professionals discuss ideas over a nice cup of tea. Warning, other beverages may be consumed. In this episode, I chat with Darren Nerland, Senior Leadership Development Manager, keynote speaker and co-founder of Learnapalooza. We discuss upskilling and what the future of workplace L&D might look like. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Ideas Podcast. With me today is Darren, and we're going to be talking about skills. Don't walk away. This is not an advert for some edtech company. Don't panic. This is a proper conversation about skills. We're not going to try and sell you anything. Don't worry. And actually, I think it's going to be a really interesting conversation because I've kind of seen you speak in a lot of places. Obviously, you co-founded Learnapalooza. So I've seen a lot, but we've never stopped and had a conversation. So I'm very much looking forward to this. So first of all, thank you so much for making the time.
Very well.
And second of all, of course, we pretend to be like an L&D instructional design podcast. But the real reason people tune in is to find out what people are drinking. So, what have you got?
I actually have, it's instant though, but I have Vietnamese coffee, which I really like. It's instant, but my wife, who's Vietnamese, makes Vietnamese coffee for me sometimes. And it's just so great. It's very rich and very powerful coffee. But so sometimes when I'm in a rush, it's instant. So, yeah.
Hey,
not the proper way.
If it tastes good and carries caffeine, then it's a winner, right?
Yes, there you go. There you go. Yeah.
Actually, it's the middle of the day here, so I have gone for a very safe can of Pepsi Max.
There you go.
It's quite dull, but
that's all right.
It's fine. I will have my wits about me for the conversation for once.
Excellent.
There's usually a kind of tipping point halfway through where I stop being particularly useful otherwise. So
there you go.
Right. So first things first then. I doubt there's anyone listening that doesn't know who you are, but who are you? What do you do? And why should we listen?
Why should you listen? That's an interesting question. We'll get to that one later. So Tom, I've been in the learning and development industry for, I hate to say it, close to 30 years, which puts me at around 40 years old. And I've worked for lots of different companies, so FedEx over the years, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Microsoft, Amazon, and I usually, my niche is used to be around like kind of learning ecosystems and how you implement those into organizations. Then it was a little bit, and throughout this whole thing, I've done leadership development and all those other things, right, that you love to do as trainers and as training managers, as directors, that sort of thing. And then kind of landed a few years ago on skills, on how to develop skills within organizations, how to set up that structure, and then start thinking about the skills of the future. So it's one of the things I love to do is talk to organizations about what skills they need today. How do we do that kind of alignment within the organization? What are the systems in place? And you're right, I'm not going to give you a 30-second commercial on these different systems really work really well, from a skills perspective. And then how do you think about it, 10 years out? Because it's one of the biggest problems I think we have is we don't think about what happens 5 years, 10 years now in these areas of jobs. And it's across the board. It's not just L&D, it's the HR, it's the companies themselves.
I think that's quite interesting. So first of all, I did love to say you got into skills years ago. It's not, in fact, 2022 discovery.
No,
we didn't kind of turn over a rock this year and go, it's a skill. My goodness, we must do this. Right. This sounds amazing.
What is that? Yeah.
So that's so. But one thing I have kind of come across in trying to have this conversation is that you kind of think, skills, that's simple enough. But actually defining in the L&D world what falls into that skills area of work is a little bit trickier than certainly I first thought it was when I started having the conversation. Maybe I'm just thick, but maybe others get confused as well. So when you're talking about skills, how do you define what falls into that category?
Yeah, I'm going to answer your question, but I'm going to take a step back on why I think we are confused in the industry. And the reason being is we've done a few things. One is we've set up competencies in organizations that are pretty broad. And there's nothing wrong with competencies. In fact, I've helped develop many competency maps in organizations. There's lots of different organizations, big organizations that are using, these different, and most of them know about the top 2 or 3 competency kind of companies that they use. The challenge, though, is within those competencies are actually skills. And so we say things like, hey, we'd love to have business acumen. So business acumen is a competency that some companies use. But what's in business acumen? Well, how do I know that you have good business acumen? Well, you start drilling down into those skills, and so we would say things like, well, they have to understand data analytics. They have to understand, some of the little data science pieces. They have to understand maybe that the organization's tool like Tableau or something like that. Now, as soon as you start drilling down into those, skills are actionable. So when someone says, hey, I need to build these skills, I say, well, what's the action behind it? Because skills can be measured. And that's the other thing. So they're actionable and they can be measured. Similar to objectives, right? Is when I think about skills, and the easy part for most people is what we used to call, well, I still do, hard skills or tech skills, right? I need someone that's proficient in Python. Now, proficient in Python is again, a broad topic. So if I ask them, I say, what part of Python do you want them to be proficient in? And they say, well, I just need the beginning kind of 101. So okay, great. I can write learning objectives. I can test on that, and I can tell you from a knowledge perspective whether or not that skill is working. Then I can go into a system, and I can also measure that and say, did they finish something within this certain amount of time? Does it work within my system? So then I can start to understand, do they really understand the skill, and can they apply it? Where we tend to get and so hard skills or technical skills are actually, in my mind, easier to kind of articulate and to measure. When you get into what we used to call soft skills, and why I say we used to call them is because there's lots of people in the industry right now that we're pushing back against soft skills because there's nothing soft about them, and it's really hard to articulate them sometimes and to measure them. So I call them either human skills or super skills, or not? Yeah, professional skills. But so human skills or professional skills, they mean the same thing as what we used to call soft skills. So if you said, hey, Darren, we need a session on feedback. So how do managers give feedback to our employees? Well, again, it's a deep subject, but at least you've given me something to work with, right? So collaboration may be sitting up here as far as the competency, but as you start to drill down, there's probably 10 different skills within that competency. One of those might be feedback. And so when I start talking about feedback, so I want to make it actionable. So what are we talking about? So we're talking about the verbal, the written, that's feedback to someone. And how do I do it? How do I make sure that I give good feedback to Tom so that Tom is taking that feedback and saying, oh, let me think about that. Too often feedback is like, Tom, you did a bad job in that meeting. Well, that wasn't even specific, right? I just said you did a bad job. Now, so again, we have to get specific about how that feedback is done and that sort of thing. So there's an opportunity to say, okay, let's look at feedback as a skill. We can still test knowledge on it. I actually think that in the human skill side, it's less about the knowledge. It's more about the measurement, right? But the measurement gets harder, and I get it, and that's why a lot of organizations are struggling with this. The measurement side really is about. So we do things like peer review. So peer review, does Tom give good feedback, and be specific about it? What kind, so we ask pointed questions. Now, that raises another problem is, well, how am I going to do that with all these skills we need to build? Because now all of a sudden the light bulbs start turning on and they're like, oh my gosh, I've got 20 skills that one role might need, just human skills. So that's where I think there are applications out there today that help with this. And so those are things like, where you get into psychometrics, where they ask general questions, but those questions, when you answer them, about that specific topic, and then you put that into a system that has some machine learning in there. It starts comparing your answers to other people's answers around this topic. And in one of the places I used to work for, we were getting a 87 to 92% accuracy rate on those. That to me is pretty darn good. So if I can take something like feedback and say, hey, Tom, answer these 20 questions, and it actually doesn't even have to be 20 questions, 10 questions. And then you answer them, and I've got, 20,000 people worldwide answering that same question. I get a pretty good idea of where you sit within the level of this particular skill. So I can say, oh, Tom, you rated a 3 on a scale of 8. And so we need to work on that, right? If I was your manager. So that was a long answer to what are skills.
No, I think it's really interesting because I think and I agree. I think listening to that, I think that's exactly why we do get confused. And I think when I was discussing this with someone else the other day, when I think back to when I started in the industry, much more recently ago, I must admit, but it wasn't part of the discussion.
No,
like I chose rather than kind of, a lot of people fell into the role. I looked at it and thought, that looks like really good fun. So I went off and I did a load of accredited courses, and I often say it was my biggest regret is that's how I got started, because you're right there. I learned competency framework, and that's that is the most important thing. And you don't need to get into any more detail than that, because beyond that it's just abstraction. And it's interesting that now maybe we're realizing that isn't abstraction, it's the stuff that's actually important. And that our competency framework maybe was the problem, or stopping at the competency framework maybe was the problem. Thinking it was the kind of zenithal of our potential, which is a bit sad. But so I think there's a lot of discussion around it at the moment. I'd be interested to see where you stand on this. Where I think focusing on skills is great. But it almost seems to be held as you focus on that, don't worry about knowledge. Knowledge isn't important anymore, which I think is an interesting way of looking at it. Because I think the kind of regular argument is, hey, you can look anything up in 30 seconds now. So what's the point in having knowledge? All you need is the skill to find the information. And I've been trying to kind of figure out where I stand on this. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so this is where I tend to go a little old school. So most of my job in my life has always been kind of looking future wise. I've always been fascinated with like what's happening tomorrow or 10 years from now. And part of it is because my own so I used to have imposter syndrome, right? I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not good at this, because I fell into learning development. I was really good at training technology. So like, oh my gosh, you should be a trainer. So I fell into it. And so I always kind of had this imposter syndrome, like, I got to do more. What's next, right? The thing about knowledge, though, is in the future, there will always be roles that need deep knowledge. And we're talking about things like data science but even agriculture, right? So, if you think about where agriculture is going and how much of a change in that industry is happening, most people outside of that don't look at it. But I visited South Africa recently for a conference, and I was doing some research, and I was just surprised I'm like, wow, there's just a lot going on that they're doing in researching agriculture, researching kind of the kinds of soil that they want to do, vertical farming, that sort of thing. So there's always going to be roles that need that deep knowledge. Going back to data science, like you need to understand how these things work together, right? If you don't, you can't just look that up on YouTube. I can't go, well, how's this data set over here and this data set over here? I have to dig into that, or I have to dive deep on those things. I also think that, if you're going to be a manager or supervisor, or director, or whatever, I still like the idea of, hey, let's raise people up through the ranks. Let's get them that knowledge and training and skills that they need, and keep that flow going. Now, that being said, there are a number of jobs in the future that won't need as deep of knowledge, and I think more people are also going to become polymaths. So we're going to have to be somewhat experts in a few different things, right? But it still requires some of the knowledge. So I think it's a misnomer or it's a mistake. I'm just going to come out and say it's a mistake to say, oh, you can look it up on YouTube and do something. There probably, yes. You're probably like, if I wanted to go cook fries at McDonald's or KFC, I'd go look that up on YouTube. Now, there's two things that are wrong with that. One is safety, right? I can look it up on YouTube, but no one's probably watching me to see if I've done it safely. Two is that's a job that's going to be automated in the future. So why would I even take my time doing that? And there's no deep knowledge there. So if you think about some of the jobs that are going to be automated, don't worry about those. Maybe that's fine to look up on YouTube. There are some things like in retail where I just need to know something quickly about this for a customer. Always, or I shouldn't say always, sometimes leads to other questions. I always think that there's knowledge behind those things. So I don't think it's going away. I think we still need to train, I think we need to help people learn, and I think we still need, in a lot of cases, we need to assess it.
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting because my sort of first training stuff I ever did was sort of retail and sales, and it always stuck with me. It's exactly that. Someone's always got a question. Yeah. And if you're the salesperson that has to go, well, I'll have to go and look that up. Yeah. You've just blown your credibility.
Yeah, exactly, exactly right. Yeah.
Obviously there is a skill in saying, I don't know, let me find out for you. But if you say it 6 or 7 times in one conversation, it starts to paint a picture, right?
It does. Yeah.
So I think I suppose like many things, it's that maybe that initial dash to go, it's all in on the new thing. And then maybe that gradual realization that actually, nuance has always been, I think, the kind of key thing in learning design. Maybe.
Yeah, I think so.
No one approach, no one ideology, if you will. I don't think has yet gone, this is it. This is perfect L&D in all scenarios.
Right. I think the question may be in the future. I don't know. I just thought of this, so I haven't tested it, and maybe I'll test it on you, Thomas. Is if I'm a learning professional, right? Let's say 5 to 10 years from now, and someone says, "Hey, we just need to make a training on this to put up on our corporate video site," and if I say, "Oh, let me go ask my subject matter expert to help me with that," because I don't know enough, and there's maybe not whatever, right? Doesn't it say, well, if you have to ask someone about this because there's potential nuances or whatever, doesn't that mean that it's probably not just something they could just, watch a video and be done with, or there's other questions that branch out from there? So, but again, it's like if it is that way, then I'm like, maybe the machine just make its own video. I don't know. But
I think that's the scary side of the future, right?
I do think it's go ahead, please. Yeah.
No, I was going to say a couple of years, but I think it must have been 2018, 2019. I went to a conference session by Donald Clark, and he basically said, 20 years' time, none of you will have a job. He said, AI will be writing your content, creating your videos, and publishing on the LMS for you. You'll need to find something else to do. I was like, well. Positive, upbeat start to the day.
I hope it wasn't the keynote, though.
It was actually.
Oh my God.
It was quite good. It was right at the start of the day.
Hopefully he turned it around, though, right? Hopefully he's like,
do you know what? Actually, phenomenal session. Because he just pointed out how, we're kind of obliviously walking towards this world where we're kind of going, AI is a million miles away. And he's like, it will feel that way until the day it happens. And then it will seem like it took this massive jump. But I mean, like just in this last week, and then there's a news article that guy won the fine art competition in a state somewhere using an AI generated image.
Right.
And it's well, is that art? It's like he created a picture.
Yeah.
You used oils, you use acrylics. He used an AI. Is there that much of a difference?
Yeah.
Clearly, the judges didn't think so. Except that his was better because he won first place. And we always got, art is a world AI will never take over. If AI can be a great artist, why couldn't it be a great learning designer? It's quite an interesting question. I don't know the answer. I know very little about AI. I just think it's very interesting.
So if I can comment on that, if you walk backwards from that finished painting and what the AI did, that person still had to give input to that technology. And so in the future, there's still going to have to be inputs, and so there's still in the future there's still teams that manage these things. There's still people that understand the algorithms, right? And yes, machines are going to get much better at learning. We are still, and I agree with you. It's like we're right around the corner from some of these things. Like, everybody complains to. Well, I shouldn't say everybody. A little bit older generations complain about you walk into a store and you have to check out yourself. I have to scan my own things to check out. And the thing is, that's not going to change. So you either embrace it or you fight it. I embrace it. I'm like, there are other jobs created because this one's gone away. The company now focuses somewhere else on like R&D or hopefully upskilling people within the organization. And by the way, that's where we need to go next, is upskilling, because the skill definition's fine, but we're missing out on skills of the future, and we're missing out on upskilling people within our organization. But if you think about it, it's not too far that most stores most stores have some, except for the small kind of corner stores, have some kind of automated checkout, even if it's one or two. In the future, 10 years from now, it will all be automated. So if we don't embrace that, you're just going to still sit there and complain, but you're still going to be scanning your own groceries, or, which the pandemic helped us do, it's going to be delivery or curbside pickup. And that curbside pickup isn't going to be a person bringing it out. It's going to be a little cart that's got a computer on it. It tells the directions, says, I need to take this to curbside number 1, and it pulls up to your car, and then you get out and just put your groceries in. So those things are happening, and you're right. It's right around the corner, not very far.
This is it. It's the sort of thing that sneaks up. But I'd love that, touching on the upskilling thing there. I think, again, it's a prime example of it gets talked about every now and then, but generally it's a very kind of insular, we're upskilling this person in our business to this new role. It's quite reactive. And I think you're right. But that skills of the future thing is always a very difficult conversation, because how do we go about defining the skills of the future? I know I certainly it's an area I don't dive into very often because it's not an area that I'm very good in, to be honest. So when you're sort of thinking about it, what are your sort of thoughts about what they are, and how do you figure out what you think they're going to be?
So number one, I do this all the time, by the way. I say something and I go, wait a minute, let me take a step back for a second so I can set the foundation, so to speak, right? We also don't do a very good at looking at our skills across an organization today, what we have and what we need today. And so what I mean by that is the job descriptions that I see today don't have very many skills in them. They have a lot of responsibility. You will be responsible for ... I'm like, really just want to know, and that's fine. Those are great. I wouldn't get rid of those. What I would do is at the bottom, I'd say, here's the 20 skills that are core to this job. And now I could go out and if we were all doing this in organizations and we were measuring skills and stuff like that, imagine being able to take your skills profile with you, right? Which you really can't do today. Even though, like, hey, LinkedIn's got these skill ratings. Those are not right, by the way. I look at mine, I'm like going, I don't remember ever doing this. Oh, Tom said I had this skill, and Joe said I had this skill. So they're like, hey, you're good at this. I'm like, no, I'm not.
Because they're a good judge of that,
right. And by the way, LinkedIn doesn't care whether or not I've known you for a day or I've known you for 10 years. They're just like, oh, Darren's great at data science. I'm like, no, I'm not. I kind of understand it, but I'm not, I don't want to go down that path. So anyway, so we need to get better at today. What are we doing today, and how do we develop those skills, and how do we upskill people there? And then the future wise, it's very similar though. I think once you get to the skills on how to develop those skills. But first, when you're thinking about developing skills of the future and what your organization needs, there's two things to me. One is, as I said, there's those human skills. And this is where research just helps us out a ton, right? There's a lot of people out there doing research on this. So PwC, the World Economic Forum, Institute for the Future. Every month I'm combing through their white papers, I'm looking at their website and stuff like that. And I'm like going, oh, there's some fascinating stuff out there. But oh, wait, if you look at the top 10 skills for, actually now I think it was 2030, which is only 8 years out. World Economic Forum in the top like 7 were human skills, creativity, innovation, collaboration, right? Those are things like, well, we talk about that today, is like we need more of that in our organization, agility, stuff like that. So if we're helping people today, it's going to help us for the future. We just don't do enough of it today. And the second thing is so again, looking at the research, tons of help there. Industries, every industry's got at least 3 or 4 kind of, like you got Gardner and PwC and all these things, Forbes, looking at the future of these industries, right? Whether it's retail or agriculture, something like that, you just got to do a little bit of research on it. And then the other part, so that's the second part, is research, but then also have people within your organization that have some of that kind of future skills, the creativity, the innovation, bring them all together. Even if they don't know about, well, I don't know what they do over there, bring them all together. And I've done this before in organizations where we all just start talking about the future. And you got a half a day or even a day's even better, where you're just like going to break people out into teams, and you do it like a hackathon. You're like, let's take our company and or our department. So if you're in a big company, let's take our department, and what's going to look like in 10 years. Let's bring in some of our partners and customers. Let's do this. And it's amazing what you can come up with, because they will tap into that research. They have ideas. They're like, well, my job is doing this. And then all of a sudden you're like going, oh, if your job is being automated, and so you're now focused on this, that means that this is going to change too. So you'll start talking about robotics. You'll start talking about, better, better data quality and stuff like that. But it's all about, and then you start wrapping that around things like, maybe we need more data scientists. Maybe we need more people in marketing that can help sell these things. So there's lots of things that you can do to kind of move people out of that comfort zone. A lot of people, it's the comfort zone of like, here's what I do today, I don't really know what happens tomorrow, into that kind of more imaginative, innovative space. And if you look at like the Institute for the Forum, they always do a kind of a 10-year report. What do they think the next 10 years is going to look like in different spaces? They've done this for education. They've done it for agriculture. They've done it for car manufacturing. I think it was automation in technology. And the thing is like they're not 100% right, and they never say they are. So if I look back at the reports, but it's still pretty cool. It's like 70% accurate within maybe it doesn't, this widget doesn't do this, but it does this. Well, it's still the widget that they said, right? So I just think that we don't have the discipline. We don't take the time because we're too focused on the burning fire that's today of like, oh no. And by the way, so my day job is Amazon, right? I work at Amazon as a senior leadership program manager, and we're talking about how we don't have enough data scientists and how we don't have enough people to help us with machine learning. Now, fortunately, Amazon has done something different. Rather than complain about it or try to steal people from other places. By the way, that's getting even harder, because companies that I talk to at conferences, like the big companies like LinkedIn or HSBC and those sorts of people, that they're all struggling. So what they're doing is they're starting to upskill people. They're like, we need to push people up into these areas. And there are people that don't always specialize in data science. They may be a data analyst over here, but let's move them into those places. So hopefully in the next couple of years they're up there. And then as we need more of them, I'm pushing people out my pipeline, right, internally, not externally. We're starting to get some external, but I think in the future we're going to have probably more of our pipeline filled, or we should be able to fill more of our pipeline of jobs internally if we're planning, 5-10 years out, shouldn't say accurately, better. There's no reason why we couldn't have 70%, and these large companies have 70% of our pipeline on these key roles up here, right? Just filled with, within the organization.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because the conversation very rarely goes to that kind of almost talent management place. Right. But I suppose actually, realistically, that's kind of where it should not necessarily start, but certainly focus on, because knowing the future of skills, I guess, is irrelevant if you don't have a future workforce.
Right.
One's got to supply the other, kind of thing.
Yeah.
it's interesting to say about sort of moving away from so much external, because I've certainly seen, I would say, probably an increase broadly over the last 10 years of external hire rather than internal upskill.
Yep.
So it's interesting to hear you say about going the other way, because I think you are right. I think we've had such a long period of that. One, it pushes salaries up, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, unless, of course, you're the one paying the salaries.
Right.
Which I guess is where we're getting to.
Yeah.
Realistically, if it becomes that difficult to poach people when you're paying them 6 times their actual value just to get them, upskilling suddenly looks a lot more attractive, right?
There's also a problem with equity within the company. If you're paying someone 6 times this and these, and the rest of your people are here, there's an equity problem there. So you either need to do this, or you need to kind of do this and meet in the middle. Yeah,
this is it. And I think it's I think that's an area where I think upskilling is going to be interesting in the future, because we've got. I think we've got a couple of interesting, maybe decade ahead of us, where we're going to have some really oddly mixed skill groups coming into the workforce. I was chatting to someone the other day who's dealing with an extremely young, kind of just starting in their first jobs now. He said none of them use keyboards and mice. Everything's touchscreen. He said so when we put them on our mainframe-based CIS system, they looked at it and went, "Sorry, what?" You have to navigate using the arrow keys, and you fill this in with just letters. This is it. And I said, wow, that's an interesting thing. We think, everyone's always getting better with technology. It's like, well, only the technology that's their thing, right? But also, I think we're certainly, I'm seeing an increase in needs for basic skills that historically maybe internal L&D teams have not been responsible for. I'm seeing a much higher request level for I've got loads of new employees I want to take on, but their English isn't great. We need to do language skills. And it's kind of always been an education space, and maybe as we see, current situation specific, people coming here as refugees, they're going to need jobs. Those jobs will often require them to develop language skills. L&D teams are going to have to get on board with that, and that's going to be a whole new kind of training that I don't think a lot of us have ever had to do. I know I certainly haven't until this last year.
It's an interesting place to be, right? And you're absolutely right that we have to again, this is a change in the way we think, right? So one of the things you mentioned was, kind of this is talent management and that sort of thing. So yes, and the interesting thing is L&D typically in most companies typically lives in HR, but here's L&D over here. Here's recruiting, here's talent management, here's OD. How often do we talk to each other? And the funny thing is, I've always wanted to have that conversation, and I think they have too, but we haven't figured out somehow why we don't talk to each other, better, except for like, you're going to do onboarding, so this is how recruiting does it, and then we're just going to pass that information. It's like, no, let's all work together. So I think so that's number one. I think we need to figure this thing out together and in a different way than we have in the past. Number two is I think those kinds of skills, I think there's an opportunity also here to outsource, and what I mean by that is, if you think about, because there's a big population that doesn't go to college, right? But trade schools, there's a lot of trade schools out there. In fact, I think we need more trade schools than we do more we don't need more colleges, we need more trade schools. And the reason being is for what you just said, which is, hey, there's some basic skills that we may need in the workforce. Why don't we outsource some of that so we can get people skilled up and maybe create our own pipeline, right, of people coming out of these trade schools into the kinds of things that we need them to do. And some of that may be like, hey, let's bring in people that, English as a second language, but then also teach them some skills that will apply to 5 or 6 different companies, and again, create a pipeline for them. So I think it's thinking differently about how we onboard them, and again, maybe it's not us, maybe there's some other way of doing that. But you're right. I think that those are the kinds of things that we should be looking at. But that's the challenge, right? Is there's lots of different things that are happening in just 10 to 15 years, and I think some organizations are like just like, where do I start? Right? Where do I start? And that's a challenge. I've had some of those strategic conversations in my own organization. And then we come to, once you start talking about it, once you start actually bringing people together and talking about it, you start setting prioritization and you start doing some of those things. But you have to have the conversation first. You have to bring the people together and have the conversation. Otherwise I'm just talking to myself in a silo.
Absolutely, and I think something that I think you can say about the separation of us from other sections of the HR world.
Yep.
I think part of that, so it's only my experience, is I've been referring a lot recently to like the L&D ego. The kind of, we're different, we are whatever we might be. But also that kind of feeling that that's the best way to put it. We spend a lot of time internalizing so what is instructional design, and what are the all these kinds of conversations, which are really interesting. I love to get into those discussions.
Sure.
Are they helpful outside of ourselves? Probably not. What matters to the organization is probably the impact we have, less than how we define ourselves.
Yes, it's impact. It is always about impact. Always. I mean, by the way, that's the term I use when I talk about this. I talk about impact. I say, what is the impact you want to make to your organization? So is L&D? So here's a couple examples. Is L&D responsible for retention? It's impact. So yeah, I think we are partially responsible for any kind of retention. And so, but we rarely look at retention numbers, but we should because we know that the old saying of like, well, people don't leave jobs, they leave managers. That's okay, great. So why don't we train better managers? Why don't we have better leaders? Well, if you want better leaders, you can either go out and hire them, but then they don't know much about your organization, or you can help them and help them in different ways. If you have good leaders, well, then you're solving some of your retention problems. Or maybe you got good leaders, but we're not focusing enough on that level 1, level 2 employees. And so there's some learning that goes there. I just think that, I think we, but by the way, this happens in other departments as well, right? We got to focus on this, we got to focus on that. Yeah. I don't care whether you call them objectives or outcomes. I've seen this argument, over the years, it kind of ebb and flows. And now they're like, oh, it's outcomes. I'm like, yeah, you're both right. Objectives, outcomes, I don't care. What I care about is what's at the end, what's that impact? Are we, if you're onboarding someone, what's the time to proficiency? Right? I don't care that they actually pass the knowledge test. Well, that's not true. I care. But if you're doing a really good job as a learning team, then I don't have to look at those numbers very carefully, because I've seen lots of people get, like their training ratings are 4 out of 5 and they get 90% pass rates. So I'm like, great, thumbs up, keep doing that. But now, so you're doing that really well. The next thing I want is time to proficiency. How quickly can I get that person up to speed, right? And so there's other things after that, right? So we call it the long trail, right? So the long trail of learning. It's like, what are we doing after training? And it's not just onboarding, it's everywhere across the board. It's like, I would rather you tell me that you developed a 1-hour class and it took you 40 hours, but you took 80 hours to help people along that pathway afterwards, that learning journey afterwards, and that they're getting more proficient at that skill. I want that part, this little part that you did, that's awesome. I'm glad that you did a bunch of videos and stuff like that, and blah, blah, blah. But I want this part. That's where the impact happens. Impact doesn't happen here. It's a start of impact. Impact happens there. So.
Absolutely, no. It's always stuck with me from those first roles where a manager. The question was always the same thing. Does it make the boat go faster? If not, stop doing it. It was that simple. It's like, okay, cool, we're on it. So, we're scary enough. We're rapidly coming up on the end of the hour. That's flown past as these conversations always do. But I always like to finish up with the same couple of questions. So, first thing, looking at the entirety of the world of workplace learning and development right now, what are you really excited that you see in the industry and want to see more of? And what maybe are you not so excited about and wish you weren't seeing so much of?
Oh boy, That's a great question, Tom. I wish you would have sent this to me beforehand.
I like to catch people up. People think they've got to the end, and it's like, oh, it's over, and it's like,
now I'm like,
question at the end.
I've done all my brilliance was back in the past, right? So I think what I'm excited about is I am excited, obviously, because I've been doing this for I don't know, 10, 12 years of thinking about skills. So I am excited that people are talking about skills. I really am. I think it's a great place to start and to think about. And the reason I'm excited about it is also the flip side where I don't think we focus enough on, and that's the people impact. And so I love the idea of talking about systems and talking about new ways of learning, because all of those get wrapped in. So, by the way, I'm kind of cheating here and saying skills, but I love that technology can help us bridge that gap. I love that we're gonna get better people that have these skills of the future. But the challenge is on that people side is I don't know that we think about the impact that we have to people. And one of the things that I think is I'm tired of looking at numbers for numbers' sake and saying, hey, across the board we've got this, we've got 18% or attrition. That's okay. No, it's not okay. That should be 9%, right? And why is it that way? And it should be about the people. And too often it's about whatever number it is. And believe me, I know, because I have to live this every day. It's like I have to get the time to proficiency. I have to get retention rates up and stuff like that. But if I am a learning professional and I don't have things like personas built for my audience, or I haven't gone out and met my customer, right? Now, I'm not talking about my students. I'm talking about my customer across the board. Anybody on the learning team, including the managers, directors. I haven't done that in a while. Then we're not. Then I question whether or not we're really talking about the people. And for me, that's the biggest thing: is we need to develop people within our organization, and all the numbers will follow, guaranteed. And you can. I'll bet everybody on this podcast that listens to this. I'll bet you $10 in 10 years if we focused on the people that plus interest. $10 in 10 years. You come back and you say that didn't work, Darren. That was not true. I'll pay you $10 plus interest. But it should be about the people. That's bottom line. And I just don't hear it enough. I know it's in there, but we're too focused or too scared to push back. This is why I think I never get promoted or have to go to different jobs, is because I keep on going, no, it's about the people. And I go, oh my God, Darren, you're good, but just, go somewhere else. No, I'm kidding. But most leaders, when you start talking about it, they do start to listen. So, yeah, those two.
No, that's awesome. I always it just made me think of an old HR director, and we were once all in a meeting, and someone was talking about sort of shrinkage of the workforce. And they said, they gave a percentage number, and she said, well, let's just stop the meeting. How many people was that?
Exactly.
And she's like, okay, and how did we let? I think it's about 130. How did we let 130 people down?
Yeah.
Said because they haven't got a job anymore.
Right.
Said, and I don't feel good about that. And the meeting was just kind of sat in silence going, oh, that's a bummer. Right, we probably shouldn't let that happen again, should we? It was really impactful. It's quite interesting. You're right. I don't think it's... Good. Like I said, you know that number is people. But until you stop and go, oh, that is 130 people that for some reason we hired and then they aren't here anymore. Yeah. Very interesting. So, just to round everything off, thank you again for making the time. If people want to continue the conversation or get in touch, or obviously in a decade claim their $10 plus interest, where can they get hold of you?
The best way is reach out to me on LinkedIn. So, Darren Nerland on LinkedIn. Follow me, follow Learnapalooza, my little conference here in the Seattle area in the United States. And I love to talk about this. I love to hear from people. So happy to jump online with you.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Ideas Podcast. Before you go, please consider leaving a review, a comment and a like on YouTube, and of course letting us know in the comments what you're taking away from this conversation. Until next time, have a great day.